Want to know why? Ask how. Howard the Humongous. Simon & Schuster began to tease a book from former National Security Advisor John Bolton, a book that showed Donald Trump's incompetence, ignorance, and use of every lever of government not at all for the public good, and not for the nation's security, but for one thing and one thing only, to get Donald Trump reelected. The Wall Street Journal ran a segment of the Bolton book. The New York Times ran at least 15 articles on the Bolton book and on the battle fought over it by the Trump administration, and Fox News ran more than 30 stories on the Bolton book. Yes, more than 30, on a book knocking the president that Fox News supports. The president's reaction was a vigorous attempt to ban the book. Trump and his Attorney General William Barr took Simon & Schuster to court and demanded that all copies of the book be grabbed from bookstores and destroyed, hundreds of thousands of them. But what was really being destroyed by this attempt to suppress a book? The First Amendment of the Constitution guaranteeing freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is an issue I staked my career on in the 1980s when I went toe-to-toe with the witches of Washington, Tipper Gore, the wife of future Vice President Al Gore, and Susan Baker, the wife of White House Chief of Staff and United States Secretary of the Treasury James Baker. This coven of extremely powerful women founded a group called the Parents Music Resource Center and wrote secret letters to the heads of the major record companies suggesting that I be tossed out of the music industry to get a thorn out of their side. You can read the whole story in my new book, Einstein, Michael Jackson, and Me, A Search for Soul in the Power Pits of Rock and Roll. So I care about censorship. I care about freedom of speech. I care enough to risk my career and my scientific expedition into the myth-making machinery of our society on freedom of speech. But Donald Trump and William Barr's radically un-American attempt to suppress freedom of speech and of the press, freedom of your right to know, is just the tip of an iceberg. It is one small step in a steady effort to subvert our democracy and to give Donald Trump the powers of his hero, Vladimir Putin, the powers of a dictator for life, the sort of thing hinted at in a conversation at the G20 summit in Osaka, Japan in June of 2019 between President Trump and China's dictator for life, Xi Jinping, a conversation reported in the Wall Street Journal's excerpt from John Bolton's book. Bolton writes that the Chinese leader, quote, Xi said he wanted to work with Trump for 6 more years. And Trump replied that people were saying that the 2-term constitutional limit on presidents should be repealed for him. Xi said the U.S. had too many elections. Trump nodded approvingly, close quote. Then there's the time at a private big donor dinner at Mar-a-Lago where Trump announced that Xi Jinping had just managed to get himself named president for life. Trump exclaimed, "He's now president for life. President for life. No, he's great. And look, he was able to do that. I think it's great," close quote. And Trump added an ominous wish. He said, quote, "Maybe we'll give that a shot someday," close quote. Does that sound like the behavior of a man who believes profoundly in his sworn obligation to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the democracy it enshrines? There are 2 problems here, aside from Donald Trump's narcissistic megalomania. One is Attorney General William Barr. The other is the Constitution and its cracks. Cracks Donald Trump is exploiting to the max. First, the Constitution. President Trump is trying to get the courts to ban Bolton's book on the grounds that it contains classified information. There's only one small problem. Trump claims that he has the right to classify anything he wants. Alas, according to the Constitution, he may be right. Explains the New York Times, quote, "The designation of information as a restricted national security secret is considered part of the president's constitutional powers as commander-in-chief," close quote. There's another problem that gives Trump a loophole from which to obtain dictatorial powers over the press. The First Amendment guarantees freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and freedom of peaceful assembly to petition the government, doesn't it? Well, not really. The First Amendment does not guarantee these rights. Instead, it says that, quote, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Let me repeat that. The Congress shall make no laws abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble. This is a limitation imposed on Congress. It does not bar a rogue president from abridging your rights, mine, John Bolton's, or Simon & Schuster's, to freedom of speech and freedom of the press. Then there's a second problem, a second enabler to Donald Trump's not-so-secret dream to be president for life, and Donald Trump's dream to spawn a Trump dynasty that goes on long after the Donald dies. That enabler is Attorney General William Barr. Donald Trump sees the job of Attorney General as something new in American politics. He sees the Attorney General as if Trump were the head of the mafia and the Attorney General were his enforcer, or his Roy Cohn, his blindly loyal attack dog, an attacker willing to cheat, lie, and hit below the belt. In June 2018, when William Barr was lusting for the office of Attorney General, he wrote a memo and tried his best to get it into the hands of a man he did not know, Donald Trump. Barr succeeded. What did that memo say? That Donald Trump had absolute powers. To quote the Barr memo, there must be some ultimate decision maker who has the final, authoritative say, close quote. And the Constitution, Barr wrote, gives that final authoritative power to the president. In Barr's words, this final power is, quote, among the discretionary powers vested exclusively in the president by the Constitution. But that's not all. Wrote Barr about the president, he alone is the executive branch. As such, he is the sole repository of all executive powers conferred by the Constitution. Thus, the full measure of law enforcement authority is placed in the president's hands, and no limit is placed on the kinds of cases subject to his control and supervision. While the president has subordinates, the Attorney General and the Department of Justice lawyers, who exercise prosecutorial discretion on his behalf, they are merely his hand. Let me repeat that. The full measure of law enforcement authority is placed in the president's hands, and no limit is placed on the kinds of cases subject to his control. And the Attorney General and Justice Department lawyers are the president's fingers, the palms of his hands, with which the president can do whatever pleases him. Barr also explained that the president can start any investigation or case against anyone he wants. In Barr's words, the president has, quote, complete authority to start or stop a law enforcement proceeding, close quote. Like, for example, starting a law enforcement proceeding against Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. Yes, Barr said the president can start the process that would lock up his political opponents. Barr implied making lock her up and lock him up, those chants, a reality. What's more, according to Barr, for the president, there is no such thing as a conflict of interest. There is no problem with self-dealing. In the case of any other politician, self-dealing is corruption, but not in the case of the president. Says Barr, quote, the conflict of interest statute, 18 U.S.C. 208, does not apply to the president. Barr adds, quote, the framers' plan contemplates that the president's law enforcement powers extend to all matters, including those in which he had a personal stake. Yes, quote, including those in which he had a personal stake, close quote. Meaning that the president can make nice on Turkey's monstrous president for life, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, in order to further the interests of his Trump towers in Istanbul. He can butter up China's Xi Jinping to get his daughter money-making patents in China. According to Barr, this is all legit, and it's the sort of thing that Donald Trump seems to be doing. In his book, John Bolton complains that the president tossed away all concerns about the well-being of the citizens of the United States and used his conversations with world leaders like Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin solely to ensure his own election. Asking foreign leaders to meddle in American elections, asking the aid of a foreign power to help your own election campaign is illegal. In fact, it's one of the crimes that the Founding Fathers feared the most. They were certain that allowing foreign powers to back a presidential candidate would destroy our democratic republic completely. But William Barr puts one person and one person only above laws like these. The man in the White House, the president, specifically President for Life wannabe Donald Trump. So according to William Barr, Donald Trump is free to declare an entire book top secret solely to cover up his own dirty deeds. And that attempt at a cover-up is unfolding before our very eyes, at the risk of our freedom of the press, at the risk of our freedom of speech, and at the risk of a right not guaranteed by the Constitution, but crucial to a democracy. Your right and my right to know. This is Howard Bloom, speaking to you from the future. It's your job and my job to make. Or, want to know why? Ask how. And now for that sleazy, slimy, sneaky, seditious, sibilant little off button. I think I got it.